are out here today because this morning the state of Rhode Island issued an order to have all of the Rhode Islanders that are currently living here be out within 48 hours. A lot of them have already been kind of pressured to leave and are leaving, and so we're here to raise awareness that there are over 80 plus encampments around this state. This is one of many. We don't have enough housing, we don't have enough shelter, and you really can't clear an encampment with 48 hours notice without more supports and resources available. And what about the other 79 encampments we have that are outside? We have over close to 500 people living outside on any given night, and certainly not enough resources to put them into shelter or other places to stay.
And what's your message to the people who are staying out here, who just got that notice this morning?
Just keep the faith. I mean, I just can't even imagine, any of you put yourself in a position of the fact that you might lose your home or experience homelessness, and then you find another place to stay. And for some of them, this may be the first of many. So what ends up happening is they're in, a tent here, a tent there, they couch surf, finally they're staying here, and then they're told to leave with such short notice without a, real sense of where they can go. And, ultimately our challenge is, and the coalition runs the hotline that helps connect people with shelter. I feel like I run a 911 where I don't have enough police and ambulances. And what happened today was, we're going to send all of the, the people at this place, we're going to send the fire trucks here. But what about the other, 500 people that I have in need around the state? And so what it ends up doing is it ends up skipping the line for some people, that we have so many people in need, we don't have enough resources. And we can't just focus on this one encampment. There are Rhode Islanders all over the state who are living outside in their cars and really just trying to make a life for themselves and survive day to day.
The word eyesore has been thrown around a lot, and the governor earlier today said that they were moving the inauguration inside. Do you think that this has anything to do with that? He said that it had nothing to do with that and it was bitter cold, but do you think that those two have any sort of connection?
I mean, I'm not going to speak to that, but I think any Rhode Islander trying to survive is in an eyesore.
Can I ask you you said about the skipping the line?
Yeah.
Right, there's a system called the coordinated entry system that you use to prioritize the order in which people can access housing.
Right.
How were these beds gotten this morning? Because my understanding is CES had nothing to do with finding these houses all of a sudden for the people who just happen to be in this location.
Right. I mean, and I can't speak to all of the places that people go, because again, people can choose to go where they're going to go. Some providers may make space available, but like I said, I've got hundreds and hundreds of people waiting for a shelter bed and calling. So there's some people that we are able to get into shelter, and we've done that this morning. But the 500 people that are outside, we don't have enough room for all of them. And so then what ends up happening is it feels like this last minute grab to try to get everybody in resources, when really you wanted to try to transition an encampment or change it around. You need the time to strategically make that happen and not have an inequitable kind of allocation of resources. And I'm not necessarily saying that's what's happening here, but
right.
I want to make sure that we're focusing on all of the Rhode Islanders that are outside tonight and trying to access services, and not just the couple that are here, because we really do have a problem statewide.
And just for my clarity, CES hasn't been messed with in any way, or hasn't had anything to do with this?
No, we are abiding by coordinated entry. My organization, we are abiding
Right.
by the policies that have been set forth by our community, and that is really mandated by the federal government.
Right, so no one got bumped up to the top of the list through CES.
We have maintained the policies and procedures in our hotline. Yeah, but again, some people can find another place to stay, but the issue is it's all a Band-Aid, right? Like really the systemic issue is we don't have enough housing. Think about how much it costs to rent in the state of Rhode Island. A 2 bedrooms, close to $1,700. You need to make $70,000 a year to afford that. The average renter makes between close to $40,000 a year, and then people experiencing homelessness, over half of them make nothing, and then another third are between $6,000 and $12,000 a year.
Right.
You'd need an apartment for $200 a month. That doesn't exist in Rhode Island.
Especially on a day like today where it's pretty disgusting outside. There's a lot of rain and everything. Getting people out of the tents might seem like it's a great idea. Get them into that emergency shelter. So is there maybe, I don't know, kind of a blessing in disguise with this, or is this really just,
We don't have the beds. We don't have
That's
the
the biggest
beds.
issue. Just
We don't have the
you don't
beds.
think there's
We don't
enough
have the
beds.
beds. We don't have the beds. Yeah. And you might be able to get some people inside, but I keep coming back to, we have close to 500 people living outside. I don't have 500 beds.
Even here
available.
at the State House, they mentioned that around 17 to 20 people were living here, and that they're going to try to get beds for everybody living here. So there might be enough to cover people here, but you're saying across the state,
Across the
500
state,
people.
there is not enough. And that was who was here this morning. A lot of people go to meals, community meals this morning. So you might have people that walked away to go to a doctor's appointment to get a bite to eat and stepped away. I mean, imagine how many of you were at your homes at 8 a.m. this morning, right? You probably had a job. You went out to go do something. So there just simply isn't enough beds across the board. And that's really what I want to come back to, is we need more resources, and honestly we need more housing. And I think my just big concern, aside from all of the Rhode Islanders, including the people here, is just what kind of example does this set? We had the opportunity with the people living here to do this with grace and the right way, and across the state we're fighting battles about NIMBYism, not in my backyard, and this is the state's backyard, and we had an opportunity to make sure that everybody here was cared for and connected, and set an example about how all of our communities in the state can say, what any Rhode Islander outside is unacceptable, and we want to make sure that there are resources and shelter and housing for everyone. And I look forward to working with the governor and the state on that, as we have done and will continue to do, but we're not there yet. We have a lot of work to do.
There's a pervasive rumor around the State House Hall is that today was essentially a reaction to the terrible optics, if you will, of the Christmas tree lighting, the sort of let them eat cake moment, mixed with poor attendance that was obviously dampened by the presence of this encampment. Have you heard that, or do you get any sense this is sort of a ready, shoot, aim?
Yeah, I don't know that I could speculate on that. I mean, I think what I can speak to is the issues that people experiencing homelessness are facing, the work that we're trying to do, the work that needs to happen. But, honestly, I don't know that I could speculate on that and be accurate, and I would want to make sure that I'm accurate.
Is there any legal standard for State House employees handing out eviction notices?
Again, I am not an attorney. I am a social worker. I'm a humble social worker, but I will say that the ACLU and others are really looking into this as a violation of the Homeless Bill of Rights, and that was something that was passed in state law under a prior governor, and there is concerns that this really is a violation of that. So I think this isn't the last of what you'll hear about it, but it's really, like I said, this problem is pervasive around the state, and I just wish we'd done better.
Do you have an idea of best practices for doing something like this in the right way?
Yeah, so certainly. I mean, I think one of the big challenges that we're facing is winter, right? So we have a lot of inclement weather. And honestly, if you ask somebody experiencing homelessness, they hate rain sometimes more than they hate the snow, right? Because rain you can kind of shovel away. Yes, it's cold, but it's the water that's really hard. It seeps into your can, it soaks everything, you can't get it dry. So, the way to do this right is strategically, with a lot of planning and forethought and a lot of partnership and inclusion of different stakeholders, and making sure that the service providers have what they need to deploy strategies. So most communities are planning, next year for next year's winter, and making sure there are places coming online. And I mean, we had called for a lot of resources in the summer for shelter, for housing, and unfortunately those weren't all received. I mean, there were things that came out. I mean, I don't want to say that there wasn't anything. We're grateful for what came, but it wasn't enough. And what's coming now is, it's hard to deploy stuff really, really quickly. You need that time. And really, this is a public health crisis, and it really necessitates a state of emergency.
It is.
And treating it like the emergency that it is, because my fear is we're going to have people die. And we do have people die every year, but this is really a public health emergency.
Do you think the Cranston Street Armory, that was recently announced as a shelter location, do you think that's a sufficient enough plan? I know they're only using one ballroom of a 4-story building.
It's not being used.
I mean, I think the solution is you got to have a lot of tools in your toolbox to address homelessness. So it's different types of shelter for different types of needs. You got to be considerate to families who may be trying to get their kids in school districts that aren't in Providence or aren't in Cranston. You got to be considerate of people who may have medical needs that need to stay near their physicians, or that trouble in a congregate shelter. I mean, some people have oxygen they need to plug in, and that's difficult to do in a large setting. So you need to have a multitude of options and really be addressing the issue from all sides.
What is day shelter availability like here in Rhode Island?
I actually don't have a ton of information on me about day shelters. That's probably something I could get back to. There are some that open that are more associated with like the medical community, and then there are certain places that open as warming centers under REMA, but it's all not enough. And really, you probably wouldn't need as many day shelters if everybody had a house, right?
And what was the number one priority when you found out about the news this morning for your coalition? What was the discussion like?
It was really just first just shock and sadness for the people that are here having another trauma that are experiencing, and then just trying to figure out what we can do. And I mean, honestly, at the coalition, with the exception of the call center, which is a really hard job, we kind of have the easy work. We get to go to the State House and advocate. We run databases. The people doing the hard work are the case managers and the outreach workers that are out here. Crossroads, House of Hope, Amos House, all these organizations have these staff that have been working with these clients, some of them for, months, if not years, to try to get housing. And, it's just unfortunate that this is where we are today, that this is how I'm spending my time.
And have you been in communication at all with the administration or anybody from the administration?
Yeah, we've had communication throughout the day. I mean, I think we're trying to keep a relationship that's, as kind of cordial and, interactive as we can, because I still have coordinated entry and databases that need to get run.
Right.
But, we've made it clear that this is not how we would have hoped it would have gone. But yeah, we've had communication with them.
There was a gentleman today that told me that 9 a.m. Friday, he is not leaving the plaza. On the back of that letter that they handed out today, it said that you could be subject to fine or an arrest. Are you going to be here 9 a.m. Friday? And what's your message to people when it comes to that deadline?
I mean, I really think, it's a homeless Bill of Rights violation, and that's where the ACLU and other organizations are getting involved to help, protect the rights of individuals that may be infringed. Again, we support Rhode Islanders to find housing and basic needs where they can. I mean, you got to survive.
Was there any advance notice to your group, and I apologize, I was here late, but was there any advance notice to your group or any advocacy agencies about today's activity?
I mean, I can't really speak to notice for other individuals, so I think it's hard for me to say. I mean, we were really just kind of learning about this with everybody else. I think we had slight advance notice, but again, this was a surprise.
And do you think, and not asking you to make a judgment call on the administration, but do pop quizzes, terrible surprises like this often end up putting people's health actually more at risk than the current terrible situation?
I'm going to reframe how I answer that. I mean, anybody living outside is a health crisis, right? Anyone that is experiencing the stress of homelessness, that doesn't know where their next meal is coming from, that is having to be relocated for whatever reason. It could be that you live in Section 8 and you're doubled up and you can only stay 2 weeks because of limitations from the housing authority. So, the trauma, all of us complain when we have to move apartments. Imagine living in a tent and having to relocate all of your things.